Good morning, everybody. This morning I wanted to work on this carriage clock that I got not too long ago. It was on eBay. It was just a buy it now kind of price. It was a reasonable price. I think it was like $27, and I offered them like $22, and they accepted it. So it was not. It was wrapped nicely when they shipped it. Wrapped everything up real good, but I've worked on it a little bit. I cleaned the case up some, and I put the bottom back on. The bottom was kind of attached, but the music box wasn't, and the movement was moving around inside, and so I had reattached everything and got it running and put it in beat, and it's been running for a while, but the music box side won't wind, and if you peek inside, there's a weld of some solder on the spring. The click's not holding, so I know I've got a little bit of work to do in there, but I wanted to find out about the clock first. And so it's got the little crossed arrow symbols down there, so I had to start researching and seeing what kind of clock this was. And it is a Hamburg American company clock. And that company was started by Paul Landenberg in 1873. He and another fellow, Philip Lang, started that company, and they called it, what did they call it? The Landenberg Lang Urin Fabric, so clock company. They mostly made clock parts at that time. They didn't make clocks that they sold. They sold movements and dials and different things like that, because Landenberger was the son-in-law of Junghans. He had worked for him for, I think, about 5 years, and then started his own company in the same city. So the first trademark for Landenberg and Lang, which I might be interested in trying to find what of, it's a steamship on the back, and it says "In God We Trust" by it. So that would be an 1870s movement. But they changed it to the Hamburg American Clock Company in 1883, and they came up with this crossed arrow logo in 1892. And they were a major producer for exports that went to Great Britain and the USA. And so in 1910, they had 1,300 employees. They were in Schramberg, Germany. That's where the Junghans company was also. In 1925, they had 2,200 employees. And then in 1926, everything started going down. They joined with Junghans and VUF, which, if I can say this right, Verein T. Freiberger Unfabriken, which was the Gustav Becker clock company. And so that was in 26, and so you could still find their movements and their clocks until about 1930. There was a formal merger of those three companies, and they had different logos that came out. You might find the J under the crossed arrows, where it was a combination of both companies, but it was Junghans' company by then. Landenberger became a board member of Junghans' company until he died, I guess. He died in 1939, born in 1848. So that got me interested in wondering why in 1925 they had 22 employees, and then in 1926 they're starting to merge with another company. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense, and so you have to think about what's going on in the world at the same time. World War I happened, and there's little crossed arrows on the back also. I'm not really sure what this is going to do. I think it shuts off. Oh, you turn that little dial in it, and it shuts off your alarm. Okay, that's cool. You don't have to turn the dial to make the alarm stop playing music. But we're going to get into all of that. what I did learn was some interesting history. I always thought about the Great Depression being an American thing, but it happened all around the world. It started in the U.S. because of the stock market crash. People were booming in the 20s, and when stocks started going and the panic happened and everybody started selling, the stock market crashed, and then people were unemployed, and then they wanted to get the money out of the banks, so they caused the banks to crash by withdrawing their funds, and a lot of people lost money that way. But it affected Germany because post-World War I, the government that they set up, I can't think of the name of it, the German king basically stepped down, and they set up a different form of government. And when the Depression was hitting there, the chancellor that they had was afraid of inflation, so instead of spending during the Depression, he increased taxes to reduce the budget deficits and put wage cuts and spending reductions, all trying to keep prices down. And his policies ended up pushing their country into a Great Depression. About 6 million people were unemployed, which was like 40% of the blue-collar workers, about 60% of the white-collar workers. And so all of that affected the clock companies in a way that what I read was that the government that they had in that time was, let me show you what I found, so you're not just looking at that nothingness. What I found was that the government that they had set up was very dependent on, let me find it again, I'm struggling here. What's sad was there was few food shortages, but millions couldn't buy it, and the children died. Thousands died from malnutrition, hunger-related diseases. And it was unbelievable. So the government at that time, they weren't relying on exports as much as they were American loans. And so since 1924, our loans had been propping up the government that was established after the king stepped down. So they didn't issue any more loans after late 1929, and then they started calling in existing loans. So that would explain why some of the clock companies were struggling. 1926, so they were kind of starting to merge, and then by 1930, it got bad enough that Youngins, who was the oldest company, could just take over the other two. So with that little jaunt into history, we're going to get into looking at this clock. Let me get the light back on it so you can see a little bit. And I'm going to start taking this apart. Alright, I was able to get that off. And this just lifts away. Nice little bevels. Little bevels on here. This needs to be cleaned. And then there's just 4 nuts down here. You don't have to take these off. That's why my whole post was wanting to turn, why part of it's unscrewed. Oh, I had so much trouble getting that off. The whole thing was spinning because this was loose. So if you wanted to take the whole case apart, this would be how you would do it. I don't need to take the case apart to get this movement out. These come out. This is holding the movement in. Little metal bumpers. So when they shipped it to me, whoever had been in here playing around only put one of these back, and the whole movement was moving back and forth. Even though they wrapped the outside of the clock, the whole inside was moving around, vibrating every time they tossed the box around. So I'll clean those up too. So the whole movement was only attached on one side, and it would rock back and forth this way. But if you're careful, you can slide it out without damaging the hands or the face. And what I noticed, and I don't think it was from shipping, was this broken side right here. But when it's in the case, you don't notice it. The case comes right around through on the glass. The little circle comes right around, so you don't really notice that when the clock's put together. So we're going to take these hands off. That one's on there snug. I'll put it down here so I'm not pressing on the clock itself. And that whole each moves back and forth in there. So I think I'm getting somewhere around moving the whole thing forward. So this clock with this symbol means it was made between 1893 and 1926. Because in 1926, when I was the company, they made them start putting some sequence numbers on the back to make movements, so it was before that. There we go. Just gotta be patient. I'll put a little rock oil in there, it'll come out a little easier. Came off that, didn't it? Okay, so now, how's the face come off? Looks like it's really on. It doesn't look like it comes off. So you have to be very careful laying down work on this. Possibly right there, looks like a little something I can release. And the face might slip out under that. It might be through the paper right there. So at least I can get the paper off safely. Oh, I always investigate before we start breaking things. There's pins right here on each side. So I'm going to pull these pins out to release the, not plates. Put that on it. I'm trying not to damage things so the pliers don't have the lines on them. Oh, this one grips a little bit better. It's got the grooves in there. I think we must open out on this side. See if it's easier. I got a little more grab onto it. It's still, there we go. There's the leading in on that one. That one is going to be tough. Okay, that one was tough to get out, but I was able to get my needle nose on the far side and get it a little tiny bit out where I could get the end of it. Oh, I missed one. So, one looks like it might be broken off because there's 4 holes. Okay, so that one is cut off because that's where my spring is to wind it, so you don't want that poking down in your way of your spring. So these other 3 holds it on. So there's my little face. I cleaned this up a little bit with an eraser. I just went over it with an eraser and it lightened up some of the, I don't know, cigarette smoke or just age of the paper yellowing. Okay, so this one releases to play the music with this swing arm across the front. This is going to go back and forth and keep this little arm from being able to turn. Well, that's pretty cool.
Hey.
I've looked this over. I cannot turn the alarm. There's a little arrow on there to show you which way to turn it. It does not want to turn. But this little pin that sticks out rides along a ring right there, and it slowly drops off. I guess it turns this way, so it's from here to here of dropping off, so it's almost at its tightest point, so it's not wanting to turn. But I'm going to start with taking the alarm off. There's a spring under it, pushing down to give myself a little bit of room. It would be easier if I could turn it and get it to the bottom. Alright, this little guy. Looks like a long pin. I try not to unbend them all the way, because the more you bend them back and forth, the more metal fatigue will be there, and then it'll break. This one I think is long enough. Even if a piece broke off, I would have a lot of length. Very gummy. Not been cleaned in a long time. Okay, that's the front. This is riveted. It's not going to come off, my spring. And this would probably come off with the gear pullers, but we'll see if I'm going to take it off or not. This does not unscrew. It should be pressure fitted on there. It is. I can see the little slot in the side. It's just on there very well. Okay, challenges all around. This little knob shuts off your fan from being able to turn. As you screw that in, the little tip right there goes against part of the fan. So you can see when you screw it in all the way, it can't turn. Shuts off your alarm, your music alarm. I was able to get those two screws out. So get that off. I'm ready to let this down. The click is all the way on the far side in here. So I'm going to use this metal pointer to push my click up out of the grooves and slowly let this down. It's very small, it's hard to get on it. And then this one is down all the way, it's already wasn't able to wind. And that's going to come off. It should just be pressure fitted on there. I have a gear puller, but I don't know if it'll go wide enough to do that. But the tools I got recently had these bent up screwdrivers in them, and they're going to work pretty nicely, I believe. It should clean up good. It's very dirty. Somebody's got a bunch of oil everywhere. I think this is still holding the bottom on. I've got to figure out how to get this alarm piece off of here. Looks like just a pin holding the spring. There's a little washer with a pin on top pushing the spring down. If I pull that out, it should take the pressure off the spring. Pin is out. And it popped. You can see it popped up there. I'm going to have a fun time getting that back on. That's a lot of pressure on that spring. Now it unscrews. Okay, that's easy. And that's the little washer. And that's a heavy duty spring, man. Serious spring. Okay, now let's see if the bottom will lift off. That looks like a washer there. Don't want to lose these little thin things. It's not been apart in a long time. It's almost corroded together with junk under here. Let me release. I'm putting some pressure on that. Let's get that out of there. Little pin holds the end of your hairspring into that piece. This is the gold, okay? You don't want to bend this up. It's important to see if your rings look concentric, if it looks bent at all. There are ways to straighten it. I'm going to probably take a little bit of that bend out that's right there, so that when I slide this back and forth, it's not, makes it faster or slower. So when it's that way, it lets the whole spring recoil. As you bring it this way, it lets less of the spring recoil. But there's a little bit of a bend in it, so it really dampens down the movement of it. So I'm going to have to take a little piece of bend out right there, around that little tiny bit out. But other than that, it looks really good. Whew. Dirty, dirty, dirty. This will unscrew and come off also. Let me get the rust off of it. It's brass, so it's not rust from the metal itself, but it's from something near it, I would guess. Unless it's plated. Sometimes where the brass is thin, when it's plated, it can come up through and make a little rust on there, but it should clean up really nicely. I've seen these a lot in the carriage clocks. It's an odd little screw. It's not a screw slot. It's made to put a tool on the end of. One washer with a little tab that goes in the hole. And it's bent slightly upward. It's not totally straight across. Alright, time to get some more pictures. This is that click spring repair right here. You can see they soldered right there and brought it underneath, but it's not holding the clicker down. It should be, I think, more toward the end. If I can maybe bend it a little rounder, it should put more pressure toward the end and hold it into the slot better. And as I take this off, we can see the other end of that one better. See how deep it is in the slot? This one doesn't, even when it's not, when it could be in a slot, it's not down in there. There's not pressure on the end of it to hold it in. So they did a good job getting this new piece on there. It's just bent at the wrong angle. And I'm wondering why they didn't just order replacements. Click. That little rivet right there lets you change these out. But I'm going to go with what they got on there probably. Let me get a couple pictures. Alright, I've taken pictures. I've made my drawings of which way my posts go. So I'm ready to start taking this apart. I'm going to start on the time side since it's got things overlapping the strike side. There's my little deadbeat escapement. Little pallet forks. The escapement wheel. Tiny. This clock is going to be so happy to be clean. That's still attached on the front. Let's see how we can get this fan off. Oh, it's got a couple little screws on the side before we can take these. It's kind of suspended in there like the little hairspring and balance wheel. You can tighten that down all the way and it leaves end play for that. I have tried to put spring clamps on, little ones. They're too small. This next size up, I can't get between this little built-in side piece and get the clamp on there. So I ended up taking the center out and unwinding it like you would a barrel spring. That way the pressure was off of this, because this one was putting so much pressure I didn't feel like I would be able to pry this gear off. I tried side cutters. I don't have a gear puller that could get under it with this piece being so tall. Nothing would fit on there. I took my widest flat tip screwdriver and got one little corner under one gear and slowly turned and turned and turned, so I got it slowly coming up some. You want to just put a tiniest bit of pressure as you go around, because you can bend this easily. And then now that I've got it up far enough, I think I can pry with something a little bigger. There we go. I've flattened a little bit of the gears, it looks like, but nothing that would cause any problem with it turning. So now I can lift this piece off. There's your little pressure spring on there to turn your hands. And I'm ready to get this off and go to the cleaning.